It's Thursday. It is time for another edition of Silver and Black Today. Welcome back, Raider Nation. Scott Branson with you. We are set to talk Raiders football. Less about the past and the loss in L.A. and now more about the game ahead, the Raiders' home opener against the Arizona Cardinals, and one Mr. Kyler Murray rolling into and onto the Vegas Strip. And joining me, as always, is my partner in crime. That is Mr. Mo Moton. He is the national writer for the NFL at Bleacher Report. You can also catch his Raiders columns on sportsnot.com, which I read religiously, and I know that you guys do too, so we thank you for being back. Mo, here we go. We get to look forward now. We spent last show looking backward, of course, at the game last week and some of the issues with the Raiders, and we'll talk about those too because they haven't gone away, but it's going to be nice to talk about another game as we roll into week 2 of the NFL.
So you mean it's the belly aching is over? It's time to stop whining and crying about what happened with the Chargers and the sky is falling and the world is ending and we can move on and talk about the Cardinals now? Is that what you're saying, Scott?
Never, right? It's amazing the conversations I've seen in Raider Nation this week, and some of them so dead on. And I mean, we are very lucky. And again, nothing against any of the other shows because they do great work too. But on our show, I find that 99% of our fans and our listeners, our viewers up on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and all that, they are pretty level-headed. And so I like that. And I think that's true. You find the content you like that matches sort of your attitude. And so I think that we're lucky that way because you and I don't freak out too much. Every once in a while we'll get on our soapbox. But other than that, it's been pretty good. And I think that we're very lucky. And thank you to all of you. The numbers and all that stuff coming in of you guys watching and listening to the show are phenomenal. And we're just blown away and forever will be humbled by that. So thank you. Mo, we're going to set in. And on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about Raiders news of the moment and of the week, especially around some roster news. In the second segment, Tyler Vasquez of Kickoff in the Valley. We finally get one of our sister shows or brother shows, however we want to call it, on the Odyssey Network here. They are the Cardinals podcast on Odyssey. As you know, we are building a massive empire at Odyssey when it comes to the NFL podcast. And so Tyler is going to join us from Phoenix, and he's going to give us the inside skinny on the Cardinals and what's going on with them. So we got a lot to get to. And then in the third segment, Mo and I will give you a little bit of our preview of the game and kind of the keys to the game. We believe if the Raiders are going to be victorious in their first game at Allegiant Stadium in 2022, what do they have to do? We'll close the show with everybody's favorite curmudgeon, and that is Mr. Kelly Kriner. So we'll have Kelly. We'll get a little bit of his comments on the Raiders, which you know will be snide. And then we will also talk about, fantasy football, the Silver and Black Today Fantasy Football League, where there was one huge game between two owners that happened to be on this show. And there was a bet. And so Mo's got to come through on his bet because I actually beat Mo. We'll talk more about that in the third segment. But let's jump in, Mo, now to the show. And I'm looking off to the side for those of you watching on YouTube. I'm looking off to the side now because I got to go through all these roster moves. So let's go through this, Mo. We saw on Wednesday the Raiders signed Keelan Cole, the wide receiver, off the practice squad, put him on the active roster. Then they signed a new center, Billy Price, who was a draft pick in 2018 from the Bengals, to the practice squad, as well as cornerback Nikel Roby-Coleman, who we talked about on Tuesday to give them depth. He was signed not to the active roster, but to the practice squad. In addition, they claimed cornerback Javelin Guidry via waivers. We talked about that last show from the Cardinals, technically, and also placed Anthony Everett on the injured list. Safety Matthias Farley was sent to the practice squad. Kyle Pecco, for some Raider fans, they had a real big affinity for him, and he kind of got, because he played hard, but he was released from the practice squad. And of course, Kalichi Osemele was in for a visit. They have not signed him, nor does it appear that they will sign him after blowing his knees basically against the Raiders in 2020 when he was a member of the Chiefs, and he hasn't played since. So we're going to go through that. But Mo, clearly the injured Raiders, they had no injuries going into the season. We saw some big losses with Trayvon Moehrig, the safety. He will not play on Sunday against the Cardinals, although they haven't technically said that. He's been listed as out of practice, but it doesn't appear good. When you look at these injuries, defensive backfield, offensive line, Andre James in an ambulance after the game with concussion-like symptoms. We don't know if he's coming back. That offensive line, which is a musical chair offensive line, might be thinner. What do you make of all these moves, and what does it tell you about this Raiders team getting set for this weekend?
That they were thin at the positions we said they were thin at. If you remember the 53-man depth chart that I put out after the Raiders set their final roster, I said offensive line, cornerback are my two concerns. Not only because there are questionable stars in those positions, but because of the depth. If you lose a guy, what happens? Because I believe the Raiders went into the season with 5 cornerbacks on the roster. Yep. Now you put Anthony Averett on IR. You got to shuffle some guys in. You got to shuffle some guys out. So it tells me that the Raiders are top heavy at certain positions. And when you go through the season, you're going to have injuries. Every team has them. It's the nature of the sport, a physical sport where you're banging bodies on every play. So you have to expect that and you have to be prepared for that. That's why I never bought into Josh McDaniels saying, yeah, we're fine with 8 offensive linemen. You cannot listen to everything a head coach says at the podium. I know to us that's secondary nature, but to a lot of fans, they listen to what these coaches say and they take it word for word. And I say, some of it is coach speak. Some of it is they don't want to tip their hand to other teams. They don't want to tell other teams what they plan on doing because, yes, other teams are listening, like the Cardinals. Josh McDaniels is not going to tell you everything going on or what they're planning behind the scenes. So it's expected that they would bring in a Billy Price who has versatility, played center, played guard, not very well, starting with the Bengals and the Giants, but he has that position versatility if they have to call on him. But I think as they discussed this week, I think Dylan Parham is probably the guy up next because he can also, they trained him to play both positions. So it could be his time. I know we saw him shuffle in and out of right guard, but we could possibly see him in center if Andre James can't go on Sunday.
Yeah. And remember, Josh McDaniels might be warmer and fuzzier, but he was a protege of Bill Belichick. He learned a lot. He's not going to go up there and give anybody anything that they can use or tip an opposing team, especially in the regular season, around what they might have or not have, because that helps the other team prepare. So they're going to keep it as long as they have to until the NFL requires them to report it. And until they announce they're active. So I think that's not surprising to me, but you're right. Fans listen to it and they take it as kind of gospel, and it's not always the case. But Mo, the offensive line, we'll get to the defensive backfield. This was the other key area you and I have been talking about since July, right? Some unknowns there. That was before the trade of Trayvon Mullen to the Cardinals. And of course, Mullen's out down there as well. But we saw some veterans like Averett, a guy you really liked and we talked about a lot. He gets injured. Nate Hobbs, of course, has been the big story because he's played so well. But now you're dealing with these injuries and you're dealing with a situation where they performed okay against the Chargers. In watching again the film since, I watched it again today. The defense actually didn't play. I thought they played okay, and I kind of revised my thoughts on that. I thought there was a lot of issues there. But again, first game, the Raiders did not play their best all the way around, and so you hope that they get better. But that defensive backfield losing people is a really bad sign. Now, if they can go out there and play well, then they can change my mind and a lot of other people's mind. But that's got to be a big concern, especially if it lingers. Now, if it's just a week or so, and you can get some of these guys back and Trayvon Moehrig is not injured long-term, then fine. But, man, you got to roll back again. You have the Chiefs, you have the Broncos coming back up again, as well as others. It's not an easy schedule, and you need people healthy.
You do, but I think this is also why the Raiders would bring in Daron Harmon. Pretty much knows what he's doing out there, battle-tested veteran. So he'll get those reps there. He'll get the start there, how long Trayvon Moehrig is out. I believe it's a hip injury. Hopefully It's a short-term injury and he's back within 1 or 2 weeks. But I believe that they trust that Daron Harmon is going to do the right thing on the back end. He can play both safety positions, so he has the versatility. My concern is still the offensive line. It continues to be. I know people are going to say, wow, not a revelation there. Sound like a broken record. But if Derek Carr, and I know Derek Carr had a bad game, right? And like we said last show, 2 things could be true. Derek Carr can have a bad game in the offensive line. cannot play up to snuff. So if that offensive line continues to be what it is, and I wrote a piece about it, and I believe I tweeted about it, if Josh McDaniels plans on just rotating the right guard and right tackle position throughout the entire season, that is not ideal. I don't care what he says or how he tries to spin it at the podium or spin it to you people on coach speak. But how many teams do you know go to the Super Bowl, go to the playoffs with 2 spots rotating on their offensive line? Just doesn't happen. You have to settle in on 5 guys eventually.
And Mo, I'm going to go a step further and say it's dangerous. I mean, it's not just troubling, it's dangerous because, and I don't know, again, I don't know what they see out there on the market. And if they don't feel someone can help. I mean, we've talked about names for weeks of people we think would at least get the opportunity, bring them in and work them out. They have not. They've brought in some guys that are really secondary, third tier players. And that's concerning because you look at it, this rotation, and you said it the other day, we were talking about quarterbacks, or we were talking about the offensive line. You said, hey, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have 1 quarterback. Well, in this case, if you have 7 offensive linemen, then you don't have 5. And so if you look at that revolving door is not going to benefit you or work, especially in this division and especially in this conference. How are you going to not only get out of your conference or your division, but how are you going to put up with the other teams out there, whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's Indy? I know they didn't play great, but they will play better. The AFC is stacked. And so if you don't have 5 guys and a unit that can gel together, then you're in trouble. And I want to point this out too, because this game against the Cardinals, I'm seeing a lot of bargaining out there with Raider fans. They're saying, oh, the offensive line didn't play that bad. Well, outside of Dylan Parham, they all ranked, if you look at the PFF rankings, and I know those are subjective, and I know a lot of people hate PFF rankings, and I understand why. I'm not going to argue with you on it, but they all graded in the 50s, with Colton Miller being the worst. He had a bad game. I don't expect that to continue. But nonetheless, you look at that, and that's a big problem because if you go 0-2, a lot of people think that they're going to beat the Cardinals. It's not going to be a problem. You can't do that in the NFL. And just so you know, 30 teams in the NFL since the 14-team playoff expansion, okay, 30 teams have started out 0-2. None of them have made the playoffs. 0 since the playoffs have expanded. So this is a huge game for the Raiders, and they have got to get that offensive line gelled. If they don't, then it could spiral. And again, we're not being negative. We're just being truthful here. If they don't fix it and figure it out and guys don't step up, they could be in big trouble very, very soon.
I think the ideal combo there is Dylan Parham at right guard and Munford at right tackle. It's just a matter of they just need the experience and the reps at those spots. Because remember, they just drafted both guys. Illuminar came back on a 1-year deal. Lester Cotton kind of came out of nowhere after Richie Incognito retired. He kind of vouched for Lester Cotton being the next guy up, saying he's grown. But to me, it seems like they want the guys that they drafted to eventually wind up in those spots. But they just don't have the experience yet to leave them out there full time. So what they're doing is they're trying to get the veteran insurance in there now and still get the young guys reps. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, in a sense. Mm-hmm. But to me, eventually, I would say by week 3 or 4, you want to have that squared away and settled.
No question. And we'll get to Carr and quarterback play and all that later in the game, in the show. But the Raiders need to start putting some stuff together. We need to see better performance, not only of that offensive line, but of the quarterback. And of course, on the defense for the entire unit has got to perform better. We have to see more pressure up the middle, and you have to see those defensive backs, how they operate with a couple men down. I mean, it's part of the NFL. You're going to have injuries. You hope it doesn't happen in the first 2 weeks, right? It tends to happen to all teams at different times, but certainly coming off a disappointing performance where even in a disappointing performance, they were still in a position to win the game. That's encouraging. And so I'm not trying to discourage fans out there, but there's a lot on the line in this home game against the Cardinals, and that's what we're going to talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to step aside when we come back for segment number 2. Tyler Vasquez of Kickoff in the Valley, our fellow Odyssey podcast, they cover the Cardinals. He's going to be with us. We're going to get the skinny on what's going on down at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, and he'll give us the full report on that when we come back. All right, that'll do it. We'll be back in a second. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Silver and Black Today here on Odyssey. And we're an Odyssey original podcast. Thanks. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Segment number 2, Silver and Black today. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to us on audio, you can find us everywhere. Yes, we're ubiquitous. I promise, Raider Nation. Just click the link that we put out on our social media. You'll find us. It's easy. If you watch us on YouTube, we have a massively involved audience on YouTube. The chat is always crazy, as you can see right now to the right of your screen as people are talking to Mo and I in the chat. Do that, subscribe, but also hit the notifications bell so you don't miss when we have a new show. Okay, Mo, we're going to quickly move now to the Cardinals. The Raiders are at home this Sunday afternoon in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, the Death Star as it is known, and they welcome the Arizona Cardinals. And to talk about that, we bring in our good friend Tyler Vasquez, and Tyler is the co-host of the Kickoff in the Valley podcast. They cover the Cardinals, and so we go down to Phoenix now and we bring him in. Tyler, thanks for joining us, man. It's great to do a little bit of cross promotion here of another original Odyssey podcast. How you doing, man?
Oh, thanks, fellas. I appreciate it. A little warm here in the Valley, but I'm sure you're feeling it as well out there in Vegas for all the fans in Vegas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I lived in the desert for so long and grew to love it, the beauty of it. But I didn't like August, and I didn't like beginning of September, and then it would start to cool a little bit. Now down where you guys are, my daughter went to college there. It stays hot longer because you're in the low desert, so I understand. But a beautiful place. I love Phoenix, always will, and we certainly appreciate you coming on to join us here. Now we look at the Cardinals, of course, coming off a Week 1 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, 44-21, where they gave up 440 yards of total offense. Going into the season, Tyler, you know, the reading about the Cardinals, they had to do something about their defense. They didn't seem to do that much. Longtime Cardinal fans, I see, blame the cheap owners. They blame the GM, all of those things. But tell us a little bit about, as you guys went into Week 1, what was the overall impression with the Chiefs? I mean, a tough game to start the season, even though it was at home, even though the Cardinals have lost 6 in a row at State Farm. What was the thoughts of this team heading into the 2022 season?
You know, looking at GM Steve Keim, I think what he tried to achieve this year was, let's put all the money in the offense. It's a passing league. We've got one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the NFL that can do things with his legs, can do things with his arm. It was, let's give him all the tools. So that way it's going to be shootouts all day. And so they spent the least amount of money in the NFL on the defense. I mean, there's no other team that spent less than the Arizona Cardinals defensively. So going into the season, I think people knew what to expect. They knew that over the past few years, the Cardinals did draft. I feel like all we do is draft middle linebackers and inside linebackers. We've done that for years and years, and gave Vance Joseph pieces, and it just became, you know what? No, we're going to beat people with the guy we drafted number 1, and that's what we're going to do. Well, going into that game against the Chiefs, when you have another high-powered offense, you see that that's not always going to work, especially when your offense isn't clicking on Week 1. So, the Chiefs blew us out, plain and simple. It was not a game. Mahomes did whatever he wanted to do. And it's funny listening to you guys before, as I was waiting in the green room area, your concerns about your team is essentially the same concerns we have, just in different areas, right? You guys are concerned about the O-line. We're wondering defensively this week, why didn't the Cardinals bring anybody in? You know, There's guys out there. I'm going to butcher his first name. Sue is out there all day, ready for a job. And it's like, that's kind of what we need on the defense. We need some dogs that are going to come into there and not take any crap. And it's just, it hasn't happened yet. So, everyone was looking at the practice invite list, the tryout list this week, and the names on it was a bunch of wide receivers. So it was like, wow, what are we doing?
So the Cardinals plan basically is to score 55 and give up less than 50. I guess that's the plan going in. But you talked about dogs on defense, and that brings me to one Chandler Jones, who I'm sure you're familiar with and Cardinals fans are familiar with. Now he's with the Raiders. What is the plan there to replace his production in the pass rush, or just generate a consistent pass rush there? I know the Cardinals drafted Myjai Sanders and Cameron Thomas in the 3rd round. So what did you see from those guys in the summer? And do you think they can be consistent contributors this season right away.
Well, Majay didn't even suit up on Sunday, so he was inactive and healthy inactive. So it is another one of those head scratchers where your second and third round picks, your second round pick, Trey McBride, the tight end, he didn't suit up either. So it is one of those things where we're not trying to win with the young guys. I mean, we are, but not the guys we drafted. It's very strange. I don't want to sound like I'm down on my team, but yeah, it's a little brutal right now. The plan for pass rush is simply fresh bodies and a lot of bodies. Just throwing out different guys, bringing them in and sending them at the quarterback. I will compliment the Cardinals. This is going to sound weird for not bringing Chandler Jones back. The move that the Cardinals always do is sign those players. They get on the other side of 30, give them big deals, and you look at teams like the Patriots who know when it's time to get away from those guys and bring in the younger talent. So it looks like that's what the Cardinals are doing. And ultimately, to see what you got with the young guys, you got to play them. So that's what they're doing. Dennis Gardeck flying around like crazy on special teams and what he got in on defense last week. He caused a fumble. The guy looked great. I mean, he's just all hustle, all heart. Is he replacing a Chandler Jones? No. Is a Marcus Golden replacing a Chandler Jones? No. Those guys aren't going to do that. So you're going to have to fabricate that and make it happen just by, a lot of blitzes. If you look at the numbers with Patrick Mahomes last week, I think we blitzed him 54% of the time. I mean, it was the most he had ever been blitzed. It didn't work. He threw 5 touchdowns, but that's what you're going to see. They're just going to keep throwing things at defense, hope they get a stop or two, and then just make sure they capitalize on offense, which they didn't do last week. So you got to hope going into this week, that's what you fixed. The offense hopefully is clicking, and we're not blaming poor practice habits like they did this week. Last week.
Yeah, so, we'll talk. Go ahead, Mo. We'll talk about poor practice habits in a minute.
Right. So I want to move back to the secondary, specifically the cornerback position. A little bit of tragedy mixed with unfortunate. Go ahead.
Mo, what cornerback room? We don't have a cornerback room, but okay, go ahead.
But I feel like it was a little bit of tragedy and bad luck, and then just injury. Like, okay, so the Cardinals, I looked at their cornerback history of trying to address the position. They bring in Jeff Gladney. Unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident. Antonio Hamilton, I know he's been a backup for most of his career. He has a cooking accident where he burns his feet, I believe. And then you guys the Cardinals trade for Trayvon Mullen, who we're familiar with, and he comes over there with a toe injury. Raiders fans were already saying, oh, he's injury prone, he's not going to play, blah, blah, blah. He was completely healthy for his first 2 years, didn't play a lot last year because of his foot toe. So my question to you is, what is your concern level with the cornerback position? Is that at the top of your concerns list as far as positions are concerned with the Cardinals right now?
Yeah, that's number one. Robert Alford should have gotten a call. I'm sure he's been on Steve Keim's speed dial every day, and I just don't understand why he's not playing. Obviously, he got hurt last year, but when he was playing at the beginning of the year, he was great. He was probably one of our top corners on the team, and ultimately, you let him walk, and was hoping to get him on a hometown discount because we paid him for the past few years, and he was hurt. So that didn't happen. It sounded like he wanted more money. So right now, it's a hodgepodge. You got Byron Murphy, right? Who you drafted, the first pick of the second round a couple years back. That's a guy that you are you're really counting on to make a difference, and he's been good. Marco Wilson is another guy that you're expecting big things out of, but he has struggled a lot. He was great at the beginning of last year, but once some tape got on him, he's been exposed all day. And you talk about Trayvon. We heard he's at practice today. It sounds like he might get some run this week. We're hoping. But again, they're not bringing anybody in, and it's just like you don't have anybody. So when you talk about Hamilton in the cooking accident, it's just weird because Hamilton was here last year. He played good at times, but coming out of camp after the Gladney unfortunate situation, they said Hamilton had earned the second corner job, and it was like, really? I mean, on 31 other teams, he probably isn't the second corner. So it's kind of just like you're hyping him up just to give him some confidence. But, and now he's unfortunately sidelined. And so, yeah, you don't have a corner room. And so, yes, that is the biggest priority, or biggest concern and priority in my mind. And Derek Carr should have a field day to Devontae Adams all Sunday, and Waller and everybody else Renfro, they all should have a good day on Sunday.
Yeah, It's crazy. Before we move on to the offense and get a little bit about that, one guy I really liked coming out of college, and he's a guy who will tell you how good he is, but he's struggled a little bit there and not been, I think, the player that Arizona expected him to be, is Isaiah Simmons. Here's a guy I really like. What's the deal with him? Because I heard in the offseason how good he was from him. And he was very confident, which you like in a young guy to be confident. Don't get me wrong. But what's the issue with Isaiah Simmons? Why has he not developed to the type of player that everybody thought he could be?
Well, the Cardinals, when they look for scapegoats at some point this season, and they're going to, it's going to happen. Somebody is going to lose their job, and I don't think it's going to be the head coach, and I don't think it's going to be the GM. They both got extensions. What it ultimately comes down to, when you look in the mirror, it's why are these players not being developed? You're spending high draft capital on these guys, and nothing's happening. I mean, they're regressing. They're not moving forward. They're taking 5 steps back. Isaiah Simmons is one. I look at Hassan Reddick 2.0. You're playing him all over the field because you say he's a freak athlete, which he is. But at this level, being a freak athlete only gets you so far. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of freak athletes on the field. And Isaiah Simmons, you're not an exception. So at that point, he was just getting toast by wide receiver after wide receiver last week. I saw a meme and it was Isaiah Simmons day-to-day, and it was a picture of burnt toast. It was just bad. But he needs to be rushing the quarterback. I mean, they're just trying to fill gaps and holes and make up for their secondary issues. And you got 2 potential Pro Bowl safeties back there, and you still can't get it figured out. So it's just, can we get off the defense? It's just a mess. I mean, we can beat the defense to death all day, but ultimately the key to this team is going to be the offense. I mean, that's all it is.
I'll save you on that one, Tyler. Let's move on to the offense and talk about the wide receiver core. Just right now, I just feel like maybe this is sour grapes for me because I picked up AJ Green in my fantasy league. He did absolutely nothing, and I heard there was no separation from him in that first game. But what do the Cardinals plan on doing at wide receiver behind Marquise Brown, who obviously has a connection with Kyler Murray? What is the update on Rondale Moore? Is he healthy with his hamstring? Is he going to play Sunday? What's going on there at that position? I know they got Zach Ertz there, whatever, but I'm interested to see what the young guy is. He gonna make a move? Is Greg Dortch going to be the second option? Who is it?
Oh yeah, light the Dortch, baby, Greg Dortch. Offensively, you traded your first round pick for Hollywood Brown. The connection with Kyler, they're buddies. You're hoping that they are going to have the synergy that they had in college. They only connected for, I think, 2 catches on Sunday, if I remember correctly. And the first one they only had 1 in the first half. So, I mean, obviously there's only 2. So it is what it is. But my whole point is he's supposed to be your number 1 while Hopkins is out. And Kyler said it today. He wants to see him get 11 targets a game. Okay, well, you're the quarterback. Make that happen. So it's on his radar. You think it's going to happen this weekend. He's really the guy. But when you go to number 2, number 3, the other options in this offense, yes, Greg Dortch. I mean, this kid was phenomenal in camp. And every year I feel like there's a guy that stands out. And then when you get to the regular season, it was smoke and mirrors. It was playing a bunch of guys that don't have jobs, playing second and third stringers. And that's why the guy looked good. Greg Dortch, he gets separation. He catches everything for the most part. I mean, this guy, I have never been so hyped about a guy. So if you're looking for a sleeper in your fantasy league or anything, Greg Dortch for the next 4 or 5 weeks is going to be the guy offensively that I think you're going to see get a lot of targets. You mentioned Zach Ertz. I know for us, Trey McBride was a high draft pick. He was the top tight end in the draft. He's one we want to see, but ultimately he did miss a lot of training camp. So he's playing catch up at this point. Right. So eventually you'll see him. But for right now, yeah, it's going to be a combo of Zach Ertz, Hollywood Brown, Greg Dortch. You might see Andy Isabella a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Barely made the team. He had a great camp. I'll give him that. But ultimately, he basically made the team because of a lot of injuries. So until we get some guys back, I mean, it's really going to be kind of that unit for right now. I mean, that you're really not going to see anything else.
Yeah, Andy Isabella, one of John Gruden's favorite guys coming out of the combine, as I recall back then. Tyler,
we trade him to you.
Gruden's gone now. Hopefully the personnel
I know.
decisions are a little better. But I'll tell you, obviously we talk about the wide receivers as Mo brought up, and a great question. But the guy who's throwing it to him, Kyler Murray, we know about the odyssey in the offseason to get his new contract. He gets his new contract, and everybody expects that offense to do better moving forward. But talk a little bit about the mindset and kind of the how Kyler Murray is doing, how he was through camp and the preseason, and where he's at now. What kind of pressure does he have with that contract, and what are fans kind of feeling down there about where he's at and how he looked in week 1?
It feels like between Kyler Murray, the GM Steve Keim, and head coach Cliff Kingsbury, there is no pressure. They all got contracts this offseason. And it's kind of like, hey, y'all got 5-6 more years left. So, hey, we'll see where we go this year, right? And so for Kyler Murray, I know as a fan base, it's very strange because as a fan base, I think everybody's tired of the three-headed monster that is, and we see the potential, but it's really weird that they all got these contracts right now, because I think if you would ask most fans, they're all ready to see them, make action or get off the pot. I was trying to use a phrase that I don't think I can use, but ultimately that's what they want to see. Now Kyler, again, all the skill in the world, but over the last 7-game stretch dating back to last year, he hasn't been good. And the team hasn't been good offensively. And when you're counting on and you loaded up this team with offensive weapons, both at the run game and then also with the wide receiver unit and tight end, you're looking for this team to take a step and go back to what they were last year. Remember, we started 8-1, if I remember correctly, until that bad Packers game where AJ Green didn't turn around. You notice I didn't mention AJ Green at all. That's because he's literally not played for us since that Green Bay game. So if you still have him on your team, definitely drop him, Mo. But ultimately you want to see Kyler step up as a leader, and over the offseason, it feels like he has. It feels like he's commanding the offense a little more. He's talking to guys. He's not throwing as many pouting sessions as he had in previous seasons. But being a realistic fan, he still hasn't shown that he's a leader of men, and that's what you want to see from your quarterback. And ultimately, going into Sunday, when we talk about how many 0-2 teams have made the playoffs, that's staring Kyler Murray and this team right in the face, just like it is the Raiders. So, Kyler, this is your time to shine, and I feel like every time it's his time to shine, he doesn't come through. So, it's going to be a very interesting game on Sunday.
Interesting. So we got Detective Vasquez on the case. So I guess those whispers about Kyler not being a leader in the locker room were true, because I know there was some discrepancies there back and forth of, he's not a leader, and then Kyler kind of refuting those, and then he wants his contract and his agent gets involved and all of this stuff going on. But just want to ask you, as far as the offense is concerned, the recent struggles, how much of that you think is just not having DeAndre Hopkins on the field? I mean, I believe the Cardinals are 3-5 without DeAndre Hopkins going back to last year. So he's missed a lot of time. Like, how much of that do you think is, if once DeAndre comes back, they'll turn it back on?
And I hate that excuse at this point. Just because ultimately, yes, that was their excuse last year when DeAndre got hurt towards the end of the stretch. They're saying, hey, our offense really moves around DeAndre. Okay, well, DeAndre's getting a little bit older and his contract's getting a little bit fatter. So at some point, probably next season, you're letting him walk. And I think that's why you made the move to trade for Hollywood Brown. So ultimately, this offense can't center around DeAndre. He's not who's going to grow with this team, all things considered. So when you look at the team as a whole, again, they went and re-signed James Conner. They've got guys that they really like in that offense to help Kyler Murray and help this offense evolve. So, James Conner lit up the touchdown stat line last year. And this year, he already looks like the same James Conner of last year when he gets the opportunity. It's just him getting the opportunities. So ultimately, Kyler Murray really in this offense have zero excuses. Yes, they have a lot of injuries right now. But it really does come down to him just stepping up, being a leader, putting the team on his back. And I don't think we've ever seen that yet. The only time I think he's been a leader is of FaZe Clan when he plays Call of Duty. But other than that, I don't know where else he's ever been a leader. So I like Kyler Murray. I think he is a top 5 quarterback when he wants to be and when things are going good. But unfortunately, things don't always go good. So it's how does he recoup when times are bad. And that's what we haven't been able to see yet. When there's adversity, when does Kyler Murray bounce back? When I watch Russell Wilson, typically, other than the other night, deal with adversity, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, when you see these guys have these situations, they go to the bench, they get on the tablet, they're bringing guys around them, they're talking to them about how do we fix this. Kyler goes to the bench and he sits by himself, doesn't have a tablet in hand, and just is looking around. So right away, that body language is not good. Now, we haven't got to see it much this year. I was at the game Sunday, so I didn't get to watch it back and actually see him on the bench. But that'll be something that I would like to look and see if that's changed.
Tyler, before we let you go, the last question I want to ask you, and I was listening to Kickoff in the Valley. I was listening to your podcast. Great job by both of you, by the way. But I was listening to it and reading about the Cardinals against the Chiefs. And the one thing I saw consistently was about Cliff Kingsbury and the fact that this team was not prepared for that game. You mentioned that they said in the press conference that, look, sloppy at practice or whatever it was. But how much of this is on the coach? How much of this is these guys just not being ready to play, especially in a big game against a big offense like Kansas City?
If I had to pick a fall guy for this team, it would be Cliff Kingsbury. And it's because ultimately, again, you talk about being a leader of men. I think the relationship, and this is just my opinion, I think the relationship between Cliff and Kyler and how it dates back, I almost feel like Kyler runs the show. And I don't think Kyler's done anything to really deserve that yet. And I think if you had a different coach in there that isn't going to let him run ragged, I think it'd be better for Kyler. So ultimately, this is really on Cliff to figure this out and figure it out fast. Now, granted, he got an extension, so I don't know. Maybe he's got a way longer leash than it seemed, because I don't see Mr. Bidwell paying a guy to sit at home next year. So it sounds like Cliff will get a pass this year, probably next year at least. So it's one of those things where to me, it does fall on him. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that means anything. You know what I mean? Like his in the press conference the other day, when they asked what was wrong, and he said, "Oh, we need to practice better." Well, Cliff, that kind of starts and stops with you, right? Like, hello. So, yeah. I mean, to me, that was the worst answer I could ever hear, and I tore him to shreds for it. So, yeah, we'll see if it improves. They need a win this weekend. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Really quick before we let you go, I just want to, being that you just talked about the bad practice habits, and of course it came out what they put in Kyler Murray's contract and kind of took it out about his study habits. Do you feel like this is an undisciplined team as far as locking in an accountability between Kyler Murray and just the totality of the team and Cliff Kingsbury down? Is there an issue there with discipline?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I just I feel like I'm lighting a torch to my entire team, but until you show me otherwise, I mean, what else am I supposed to think? The way this team is and how they've responded, it just isn't good. I mean, and it wasn't just Cliff that said the practice habits were bad. Hollywood Brown in his press conference said the same thing. So it's like you got the players saying it, you got the coach saying it. You know what that says to me? At some point, you're going to lose this locker room if you haven't already, and we're only in week 2. So it gets to a point where Cliff, with his 5 or 6 years, I mean, you're in a rock and a hard place as an organization, and I don't know how you get out of it. I mean, you can bring in the J.J. Watts of the world, but I think this new generation of young player that is on this team, that's really who you're trying to build your team around, I don't think they listen to a J.J. Watt. You know what I mean? Like, I think they do, but I think it's like, hey, old man, like, we know what we're doing. You know what I mean? Those young 20s, I don't think they really care what the older vet is having to say. It's not the 90s anymore where the old vet has that respect and things are handled a little bit differently. I think that's part of their biggest problem.
That's what Mo does with me, being the older guy on the show. He just kind of, blows me
off.
Huh?
I got this, Scott.
Except in fantasy football where I beat him bad, Tyler. I beat him bad this week.
Yeah, it's because of AJ Green.
Exactly. I learned my lesson, though.
Greg Dortch, baby. Add him to your team right now.
Greg Dortch, exactly. Tyler Vasquez, who you could hear on Kickoff in the Valley, another Odyssey original podcast covering the Arizona Cardinals. My man, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you on down the line.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks, fellas. This was fun.
All right, there you go, Tyler. And I'm sure for Raider fans and for Tyler, it won't be any comfort, but Raider fans are probably just glad to hear that there is dysfunction in other places, because most Raider fans are used to it being in silver and black, and the fact that there is some dysfunction somewhere else probably makes them feel good, Mo.
Two things. I wish I had Tyler on before I started my week 1 fantasy league so that I know not to pick up or touch AJ Green. The only reason I picked him up is because I thought he would have some production because they had injuries, as Tyler said, the position. But on a serious note, one thing I didn't get to mention to Tyler was to connect that question about discipline. I'm wondering if there's a connection between that discipline and their late season collapses. An undisciplined team cannot handle the pressure late in the season, and they technically they usually tail off.
And I think that was the Raiders' issue with John Gruden.
John Gruden, exactly.
Same thing happened, right? We saw it for 3 seasons. So very interesting. All right, we're going to take our break. When we come back, Mo will return with me, and we will close out the show talking about our view of what the Raiders need to do to beat the Cardinals on Sunday in Las Vegas. And we'll wrap up some of the other news, including having Kelly Kriner on to talk about our Silver and Black Today Fantasy Football League. And Mo is going to eat something that he hates because he lost his bet with me over fantasy football. You're listening to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, Silver and Black Today, the Thursday edition. Special thanks again to our guest in the last segment, Tyler Vasquez from Kickoff in the Valley, the Odyssey original podcast that covers the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, that's where we're part of the family, Odyssey original podcast. But you could also be listening to us right now on 98.5 The Fan in Las Vegas or on 1140 The Bet. You can hear the show there over the air on Sundays as well. So thanks for joining us if you're listening to us on the radio. But we're here talking about Raiders football. It's myself, Scott Branson, and my partner, Mo Moten. And Mo, this segment, we're going to get into the game a little bit ourselves and start to talk a little bit about some keys to the game. And as we mentioned in the last segment, no team since the playoffs expanded to 14 teams, not 14 games, has gone 0-2 and made the playoffs. Now, before they expanded and it was 12, several teams did do that, including 3 that won a Super Bowl after going 0-2. But since the 14 team playoff, they haven't done it. This is a big, big game. A lot of fans are looking at it as almost a pushover, which we know there are none of in the NFL, especially coming off a game where your quarterback didn't play well. When you look at the Cardinals and you look at the Raiders and what they need to do, the questions on the offensive line, the injuries in the defensive backfield, what are the keys for this team to go into their home venue, Allegiant Stadium, and come out with a very important win that they got to get here in week 2?
Well, you heard what Tyler said. He said, what cornerback room? So you got to attack the back end of that defense. Davante Adams, if he had 141 yards against the Chargers last week, he should have about 181 yards against this Cardinals secondary. So I think Davante Adams is going to have another big game. Hunter Renfrow should have a big game, should be targeted more to have that big game. And of course, Darren Waller attacking the middle of the field, where we talked about some underperforming former first round picks. I believe Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons are in the middle of that defense. So hopefully we see Renfrow and Waller attack the middle of that defense. The other thing is you can't let Kyler Murray wreck the game. He's mobile. Everyone knows that. I believe Josh McDaniels talked about this Wednesday. Very special player, of course. Despite the way he played last week or in the playoffs or at the end of last season's, you can't sleep on Kyler Murray because he could beat you by himself with his legs and with his arms. So can't let him and Marquise Brown have that connection as far as like comparison to Devontae and Carr. Is you can't let 2 guys or 1 guy wreck the game. So make sure if you gotta have a safety over Marquise Brown, do that. Force other guys to beat you, like AJ Green, who gets no separation because he's 85 years old, and Zach Ertz, who's been banged up. Yeah. Other than that, again, just don't let Marquise Brown beat you with that connection he has with Kyler Murray.
Right, and I think the Raiders to win this game. I mean, listen, we've been talking ad nauseum about the offensive line, as we should. Okay. The other thing is Derek Carr. So the key is offensive line. They got to play better on both sides of that line, and we'll see what happens with Andre James at center. It might be Dylan Parham at center, and then you got a whole different issue because that'll be his first pro game at center. And so it could go south very quickly, in my view. So that's number one. Number two for me is Derek Carr. It's the elephant in the middle of the room. And I know it was going around on Wednesday about Derek Carr and from Josh over at AP, who I know Raider Nation does not feel good about, but other outlets have reported. You look at Derek Carr, and I sent this to you and Kelly earlier in the day. Derek Carr, 5 wins and 7 losses over his last 12 starts, 14 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. And the most shocking to me, actually, is 11 fumbles. You mentioned the fumbles in the last game against the Chargers on the last show. But Derek Carr, and I know that's a carryover from last season. So is that really a good assessment? I don't know. But the numbers are the numbers. We were just talking about the Cardinals, 0-6 at home over their last 6 in Phoenix. And they've had issues, and they've continued into this season. The Derek Carr situation, you and I have been said, hey, look, don't panic. We still think Derek Carr will have a good year. But clearly, since John Gruden has been gone, Derek Carr, in some ways, I believe, has regressed, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, and if I were to say regression, I would point to probably his mobility, because I pointed this out in the last show that every year John Gruden was there, Derek Carr seemed to use his legs a little better every year. And I know Josh McDaniels said he doesn't want his quarterback to run, and a lot of people took it as, oh yeah, he wants Derek Carr to sit in the pocket like a duck and get hit. And I'm like, that's not the case. There's a difference between a quarterback running and a quarterback evading pressure to buy time and extend plays, improvising. It's 2 different things. They're not the same. Derek Carr needs to maybe not run for 20, 30 yards for first downs, but he needs to be able to move in the pocket, because, as so many have pointed out on Twitter, he doesn't have a stout offensive line. This isn't the Lions' offensive line. This isn't the Eagles' offensive line. He's going to have to move if he's going to be successful and take this team far, because guys are still learning on the job. You have young people. They're shuffling people already because of injuries, possibly with Andre James out, maybe. So he has to be able to perfect that part of his game. Now, he'll never be a natural mover, but that's something that I feel like the coach staff needs to continue to work on him with.
Yeah, and it has gone backwards, because the one thing that you saw, and especially early part of last year, was you saw him get much better at that. They focused on it, and whatever Gruden and that staff, Greg Olson, was doing, it worked, right? And now you've seen kind of that, at least with the 1-game sample, and of course over the last 12 games we mentioned, it's not been good, and so he's got to turn that around. The other part I made, the other kind of key that I pointed out was, and I focused on a player, but in reality it's just something building off of the Charger game, and that is, I said you got to get Hunter Renfrow involved, but the reality is you need to spread the ball around. Now listen, Devontae Adams, if he's open and you hit him, I don't have any problem with Derek Carr finding that guy, because he's remarkable. But at the same time, you have to be able to move the ball. You have to see the field and take what's open to move the ball more efficiently. I say Renfrow, but you have Renfrow, you have Waller, and of course Adams. He's got to get that ball out. He's got to see that whole field, which I don't think he did well in watching the film against the Chargers.
Right, and I it's a combination of things. I think, one, he talked about being too aggressive, and I think that's just not taking what the defense gives you at times. But he also has to throw a better ball, because let's be honest, I think Josh McDaniels pointed this out. There was a ball I believe he threw to Waller, put too much touch on it, got to zip it in there. Again, I pointed this out last show with the interception to Hunter Renfrow. Should have been more outside than inside, away from the defender, where only your receiver can get it. Devontae Adams, that ball was underthrown. So not only does he have to be less aggressive in certain moments and pick up what the defense is giving him, but he has to throw a more accurate ball. And typically Derek Carr through his career has done that. So I'm not worried about like his touch or his zip, because he has the arm strength. He has the touch. He just needs to adjust that from his first game. But one thing we didn't talk about that I want to bring up is, and it's not a big part of the game plan, but Amik Robinson is going to get another chance to show why he belongs on this team and to be maybe a rotational player cornerback with Anthony Averett on IR. So when Nate Hobbs is on the inside, Rocky Ya-Sin's on the outside, you're probably going to see Amik Robinson out there as we did in the first game. So this is a big opportunity, a big game for him.
Yeah, and he played pretty well I think, against the Chargers. Nothing to write home about, but he did solid. So we'll see if he can improve on that. It's a good start for him, as he struggled a lot in the preseason. We didn't even think maybe he would make the roster, but there he is, and now he's given a golden opportunity. Mo, I think the Raiders win this game. I really do, but that's all dependent on some of these things coming together, especially with the Cardinals and what we heard from Tyler with that defense. This offense, if this offense doesn't beat, now again, the Raiders defense has to perform and, like you said, contain Kyler Murray as much as they can and Marquise Brown, but this offense should sparkle against that Cardinals defense. If they don't, then I would start to be really worried.
Look, I like Byron Murphy Jr. Coming out of Washington, I thought he was going to be a first-round pick. I do. But the Cardinals don't have anyone to guard Devontae Adams.
Mm-mm.
And on top of that, they got Darren Waller coming in. They got Hunter Renfrow coming in. As you mentioned, if Derek Carr spreads the ball, the Raiders should put up at least 30 points. I'm actually not worried about this game at all. And I know any given Sunday, any team can beat you. But this is a game that I feel like the Raiders should win and will win. I have a betting article that's out now. And I know my colleagues may have picked the Cardinals to cover the spread. But me and one of my editors feel like the Raiders should win by 2 scores. And again, I feel real confident saying the Raiders win this game and go 1-1.
All right. Well, there you go. That's the Cardinals. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to bring in our good friend. We go out to Las Vegas to the Cigar Box, just off of Dean Martin, one of my favorite places in all of the city. And we bring in our good friend, Kelly Kriner. Kelly, before we get into the fantasy football smack talk and all that jazz, want to get your thoughts on this Raiders offensive line, what you saw against the Chargers, the Derek Carr situation, the injury situation. Overall, how concerned should Raider fans be?
Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you. We got you, buddy.
Oh, okay, yeah, because you and Mo you sound like Disney characters to me. You sound like you're on like 3 times speed right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You didn't drink too much coffee or anything, did you?
No, it's not definitely not that. But no, yeah, when I rewatched the game, because at first, you're thinking, offensive line issue, that's kind of what the problem was. I noticed that Derek Carr wasn't feeling the pressure. Derek Carr was not, he wasn't feeling that. He wasn't moving in the pocket. So if the offensive line's going to struggle and he's not going to be moving around in the pocket, this could be a long season for the Raiders.
Yeah. Yeah, it's troubling, but I think he'll bounce back, especially with this Cardinals defense that they're going to be facing on Sunday in Las Vegas. Let's jump in on fantasy football now. Well, actually, Mo, you talked about your betting column, and by the way, you can see Mo, if you're watching us, Mo's starting to taste his mint chip ice cream.
Kelly, have you ever put Colgate toothpaste in the freezer and then just added water and then just ate it?
Oh, I love it.
That's what it tastes like. Seriously. Not even kidding. It's terrible.
So just to recap, Mo lost his fantasy football game to me in week 1, and he is now eating. The bet was I had to wear a Yankee cap because I hate the Yankees. And he is eating the ice cream. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to us on the podcast, go watch the YouTube video of Mo eating it because he looks like a raisin. He's all scrunched up because he's eating the ice cream. But it's the bet. He's a man of his word. Mo is a highly ethical and honest human being, and so he's eating the ice cream. He's giving the thumbs up because you know what's going to happen. He's going to finish that carton and he's going to go buy another one, Kelly.
Don't count on it.
Uh-oh, did we lose Kelly again? We might have lost Kelly. We'll get him back.
It was the ice cream.
It was the We'll get Kelly back here in a minute. But I'm trying to get the video here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So Mo, so you're thinking it tastes like toothpaste still. Even with the chocolate, with the chocolate there, it's not
I tried to
convincing you.
Like there's I don't know if you can see it, but there's chocolate chip in there, and I'm trying to eat the chocolate chip to drain out the mint. Oh my
gosh! All right, we got Kelly back now.
How do you like this stuff?
He's He's eating the ice cream. It's great, Kelly. But hey, Mo mentioned the betting aspect of this. The Raiders are a 5.5-point favorite at home against the Cardinals. Kelly, what are you thinking of this one if you're putting down some greenbacks on the game?
Well, the line opened 5 now. So, I mean, I think I agree with that line move. I think the Raiders are going to win this game. I think they cover. General consensus on this game is that the Raiders are going to win it. And to see that line jump as quick as it did, I was a little surprised. But there's just not Kingsbury. Hopkins is still out. The Cardinals didn't look great. So, we'll see what happens. But this is a game that
Yeah, so one of those times Raider Nation can actually bet with their heart and bet with the smart guys as far as the game goes, right?
Here's the thing, though. The things that plague the Raiders with the Chargers aren't going to necessarily plague them with the Cardinals. The Cardinals don't have a Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa combination.
Yep.
We just talked about that with Tyler. Their pass rush, I don't want to call it non-existent, but it's not nearly as fierce as the Chargers pass rush, right? Mm-hmm. The Chargers, I know J.C. Jackson was out, but they still have some defensive backs who can make plays on the football. You saw Bryce Callahan pick off that pass. We talked to Tyler. Again, he said, what cornerback room? Who's going to make a play on the ball? Even if Carr has an off game, who's going to be back there to force those turnovers? So
right.
The Raiders should win this game handily, in my opinion.
Sort of like my fantasy football win over you. It was good. So, Kelly, let's talk fantasy football now. We had a big week, just so you know, and we'll publish this below. You can see the link to the thing. And look at Mo just going to town on that mint chip gelato. It's actually gelato because Kelly, he's kind of a bougie guy over there in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, plus also, I mean, I'm sure there's, for every nice ice cream store there is in his area, there's probably 10 gelatos stored. Hipster ice cream. So
yes, we're gonna start calling them Paisan. All right, fantasy football. We'll publish the standings. I'll put this in the YouTube video. If you see it there, we'll also tweet it out today on Thursday as well. But you look at the scores again. I beat Mo 133 to 110. Kelly lost one to Slow Jam James, the guy we all kind of thought had the best team overall, 128 to 109.62. Then we had the bottom score was our good friend Just Win Wendy, and we're shouting her out. Sorry to rub it in, Wendy. She was making fun of herself too. She had just 61 points. The Idaho Infidels beat the Max Power team. The North County Raiders lost to the Multiple Scoregasms, one of my favorite scores. But you look at this fantasy football week, it was a crazy week in the NFL overall. How did that translate, Kelly, to the fantasy performance for people with teams in the league?
Well, it's funny because, like, when you look at the scoring system just in our league, was fourth. We both lost. We lost to the only person that could beat us, and that's kind of fantasy football in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. You just have to. It's going to be good in the long run. That stuff's going to even out. But yeah, as far as the actual game and everything goes, like, there are 5 wide receivers on the injury report right now. It just seems like there was a lot of high-value fantasy assets that got dinged up and nicked up here. So the waiver wire is going to be more important than usual for these first couple weeks. It'll be interesting to see, because a lot of the stuff that, I'm heavily invested in the Eagles. The team scored 5 touchdowns. The quarterback accounted for 1 of them. That's something you're
unusual.
And then if you're a Kyle Pitts owner, Kyle Pitts is not going to have a game. I don't think he has another bad game like that again this year. So it's like, but you gotta look at your team, and if you drafted stars and they had a bad week, they're stars for a reason.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, it's a little bit. It's sort of like the NFL itself with the week 1 overreactions. Now, there's some teams that we saw, like the Broncos, who should be worried. And again, there's a lot of coaching relation there too. And same thing with the Cardinals. But you don't want to get too freaked out in week 1 unless you have some big player go down with a major injury. But going into this week, into week 2, Mo is going to take on Just Win Wendy. and you are taking on our producer, David Stepanian, by the way, and who won last week as well. And I'm taking on the Bay Area Raiders. So some key matchups on this one. If you look at some of the matchups, not only in our league, but in fantasy football this week. And I asked this to both of you, Mo and Kelly, since Mo writes about it as well up on Bleacher Report. What are some good starts for folks this week in fantasy football? If there's one or two guys where they're a must start, and Kelly forgot to pay the electric bill there or something, so we'll get back to him in a second. But when you guys look at this, and now Mo's under arrest because somebody's got a siren. All kinds of great stuff here today. But no, when you look at this this week, Mo, and starters that you want to make sure that you get into the lineup to do the best thing you can to win your game. Who shines for you? Who sticks out? Who's gonna have a big week?
Well, I have my sleepers piece out or coming out. I'm not gonna tell where it's at because I know people are gonna go out there. But actually like some of the underrated Carolina Panthers players. I know they had a slow start against the Browns, but I think this year the Browns have a good defense. And I think the silver lining there, even with the Panthers' loss, is seeing Baker Mayfield hook up with Robbie Anderson. So I have both those players on my sleepers list, and I actually picked up Robbie Anderson in a couple of leagues. But I do want to touch on something that Kelly said, and I found very interesting. If you look at the points scored in our fantasy football league, right?
Yep.
I scored the third most points in the league. There are only 2 people in the league that could have beat me this week. 2. So that means everyone else, that if you want to come at me because I'm up here eating disgusting mint chip ice cream and saying, oh, the Vince Lombardi doesn't have it, the Vince Lombardi is down, whatever. Just remember, if I had played any other team, the 10 other teams in our league, I would have won that matchup. It took Scott, who scored the most points. So Scott would have not only beat me, he would have beat everyone in the league. So no matter who you are, Scott would have won that matchup.
Yeah.
So just know that Mo is down for this week, but I will be back and I will still reclaim my title as the Vince Lombardi of fantasy football. It's going to happen.
Are you sure you're not the Bill O'Brien of fantasy football?
This week I'll wear that. I'll wear that this week.
Kelly, did you hear what Mo said? Were you back? I know we've had some issues there. We're gonna We're gonna talk to Jason about upgrading the internet there.
Yeah, I heard what Mo said, but like I said earlier, yeah, Mo's right. You know, it's like there were
matchups
like between me, you, and like we had 3 highest scores.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, okay, we just happen to run up against the people that beat us. I will say one. Did you ever say anything about my hat yet?
I can't see your hat.
You see my nice hat?
You're frozen again. Again, we got to get the cigar. Just the visuals frozen. We can hear you, so the people watching can't see it. But what is it? It's a green hat. I can see that. Is it a mint chip ice cream hat?
No, it is green though. It is a Marshall Thundering Herd hat.
Oh, stop!
Yes,
you're a big
yes.
Oh boy, here we go. See,
yes,
that's what happens when you're the top dog. At least in week 1, I know it doesn't mean much, but when you're the top dog, they come at you. The Marshall hat. There it is. Now I can see it. Yeah.
Oh no! If you'd have lost by 50, I'd have still wore this hat. It doesn't matter. I mean, am I the type of person that would just buy a hat? And I did. But yeah, like we were saying with the losses and stuff. Yeah, it's always tough when you lose like that. You got to look at it. You don't, like I said, you don't want to panic. You know, but you got to realize that if like there's going to be some players you drafted on your. You got to know when to cut bait. Because if you hold on too long or clog on a roster spot, it doesn't do you any good.
Yep.
Yeah. My team, I'm fine. You know, we're 3 and 4 in points and 7 and 8th in the league. I don't see that staying that long.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I get Kelly in week 5. So we got a few more weeks to go before that. And I was studying, and you were talking about good pickups this week, Mo. And so I was doing my research. I'm like, okay, because I told you guys I stream defenses, I stream tight ends usually, but so I stream defenses. So I'm like, I got to go get the Browns defense. Guess who has the Browns defense?
Kelly,
Mr. Mint Chip.
Yeah, the Browns. I mean, the Browns defense would be a good one to have. I think so.
Yeah. You went black on us again.
And they're playing the Jets. They're playing the Jets this week. So
Yes, exactly.
you know that's like 15 to 20 points. Right
And I knew, and I'm like, I went to pick it up, and I'm like, oh gosh, and then there I see it, Mostradamus beat me to the punch, punch.
That's the thing when you're like I said, streaming tight end, streaming defense. You kind of be quick on the punch, but also a couple weeks in advance. Because if you're in a league that has like waiver priorities, you might not want a week or two, so you get a higher priority, so you can lock in a player or a defense or a kicker. Because if you're just going week by week, every week, you get stuck in that same priority number. So if you can pick up a defense or a tight end or something that you can play 1, 2 and be okay, that priority is going to be higher. So if somebody pops up that's everybody's going to want, you have a much better chance of getting them with that priority or two. Yeah,
there you go. Well, Kelly, man, we appreciate you joining us, and we're gonna wait. We might just continue, just let the show roll until Mo vomits from his mint ice cream, because he doesn't look happy right now. But Kelly, man, we appreciate you being with us after I know a hard day of work. So thank you, buddy.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Yeah, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, we will have Kelly back on next week, and we'll talk about the latest fantasy football roll-up. So how you doing? How's the mint helps with digestion? Are you feeling like it's clearing out your dinner? You've cleared your palate a little bit there, Mo?
I feel like I don't have to brush my teeth tonight because my teeth feel squeaky clean now. I mean, I just ate like half the. I don't know if you could see it, but I just ate like about half.
Look at that.
Yeah.
See?
There you go.
And you know what? I give you all the credit in the world because all you had to do was like take one spoonful. But I know you're also a very smart dude and you spend your money wisely. So you're figuring, hey, if I bought the thing, I'm not going to let it go to waste.
Because you know how expensive things are in New York City. I mean, I'm not going to even tell you how much this mint chip crap costs, but it wasn't cheap.
Too fun. All right. Well, that's going to close out the show. And Mo, again, I agree with you on this game against the Cardinals for the Raiders this week. I think they're going to roll and do really well against them, and they really do need it. And hopefully Derek Carr plays like he usually does, and he kind of puts some of that to rest, because I think this team mentally needs to get past that. It doesn't need to be a storyline, because it might not impact them right now, but the longer it goes, the bigger it becomes, not just for fans, but I think sometimes in the locker room, even though they all say they don't pay attention, we all know these guys are younger guys. They're all watching social media, and it just does take a thing. But also for Josh McDaniels, he wants to move past it and focus on areas they have to improve. And that's not the quarterback, because they didn't think at all that they would need to worry about quarterback.
And one thing I will say, and I wrote about this in my Derek Carr piece that's out on Sportsnot, the last time Derek Carr threw 3 interceptions in the game, the very next game, he completed 29 of 32 of his passes, threw for about 270, 280 yards, and a touchdown. The problem was, this is the year that John Gruden traded Khalil Mack, and the Denver Broncos ran for like 160-something yards on the Raiders' defense, so they lost 2019. But my point is that after a bad game, Derek Carr rebounded and played exceptionally well. Now, he's going to have a lot more help this time around. The Cardinals' defense is going to be as good. So I expect the Raiders win, and I expect a convincing victory on Sunday.
As do I. Well, get ready for that one, Raider Nation. We appreciate you being with us and listening to Silver and Black today. We will be back again on Sunday. We'll be back Sunday post-game. Join me and Murph from Raiders Fan Radio. Mo is completely swamped on Sunday, so he can't.
I'll be calling out sick after eating too much mint chip ice cream, so I won't be there.
He won't be able to cover the games this week because he's going to be so sick from the ice cream. But if Mo can jump on, he will. We don't count on it because he's too damn busy. But if he does, he will. Especially if something crazy happens, I know you will, because you'll be too pensive, and you'll have to jump on and say, well, I need to talk Raiders, even though you're sitting there with probably 8 computers writing 16 different stories. But we appreciate it, man. And we appreciate all of you. For all of you who were chatting with us on YouTube during the show, thank you for that as well. We get a lot of enjoyment as well. So, Mo, we will talk to you then on Tuesday, where we'll recap the game with the Cardinals and go a little bit deeper after we watch the film. But thanks, my friend, and thank you for coming through on your bet and eating one of a food that you would never eat unless you had made a bet. So we'll see. You'll have your chance for revenge later on in the season.
Uh-huh.
And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. I'm a man of principles. Just remember that, Raider Nation. I'm a man of principle. So I come through when I say I'm going to come through.
Yes.
But the other thing is, next time we do talk, Raider fans, just relax. I know there's a lot of panic out there this week about losing to the Chargers. I get it. It was a big deal. It was a division matchup. A wise philosopher once said, RELAX. Relax.
They did, and you need to, and I'm sure they will because they'll be enjoying a win, I believe, against the Cardinals. Okay, for my partner, Mo Moten, for our producer, David Stepanian, who's actually producing the show this week from Seoul, South Korea. Yes, we're international. We appreciate that as well. I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black today. Take care. Have a great Sunday, everybody. Enjoy the Raider game, and take care of one another, and we'll talk to you next time.